Welcome into the install with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. That, of course, is the main man, Greg, and we're happy to have the entire crew back for another week of work. We've got the second week of OTAs, the final week of Phase 3 that's going on around the NFL right now, and then Greg will be in Nashville for mandatory minicamp. We'll have full attendance, including Cosell. It'll be a great time had by all. And Greg, right now the focus at OTAs has been talk to assistant coaches, and I know how valuable those conversations are for you in the work
Yeah.
that you do. But always good to talk to Bill Callahan, especially with a lot of different pieces and parts of the Titans' offensive line, but in particular, Bo Hardigree, the quarterback's coach, and the emphasis that they're working with on Cam Ward right now and just getting his lower body, his footwork as consistent as humanly possible. Because everybody's wowed by the arm angle throws, the whip around a defender to get it to the intended target, but they're just trying to get him to consistently play on time and in rhythm so that he doesn't have to improvise as much as he was
Right.
able to do in college. So he has other tools in his bag.
Yeah, and that's always the key, Buck. I go back to when I learned the quarterback position from Bill Walsh 100 years ago, it seems, and all he's talked about was the lower half. That it all starts with your legs. That he would look when he studied a quarterback, he would look at their legs on their drop back, and if everything was right with that, with the legs and the setup, then he knew that they'd throw the ball well. And the thing is, and I'm a firm believer in this, and it comes from people like Bill Walsh and guys I've learned the position from, who were coaches in the league, is you should throw the ball the same way every time unless the defense demands otherwise. There shouldn't be any change in the way you deliver a ball. You know, in some ways it's like a baseball pitcher. If you drop back, you drop back. Obviously, there's different drops. And he'll be in the gun a lot, Cam Ward, I imagine. They'll put him under center. I'm sure they've worked on some of that, but he'll be in the gun a lot. So the drops are a little different, but you still have to plant that back foot and you have to stride to your throw. And you can't just get into, which you see a lot now because of the way the position is taught beginning at a young age. You see a lot of quarterbacks, and I'm actually watching college tape still, for probably about another 2 weeks before I dive back into NFL tape. I'm watching these college quarterbacks, and so many of them, they grab the ball and they just kind of throw it, off balance. You can't really play like that in the NFL. There's certain throws that, you can make those throws to really quick, short throws, but you want to have your feet set. You want to have a firm base. You want to have good ball carriage. That's what they call it, where the ball is. You don't want it too low. You don't want it too high. And you want to be in position to deliver the football the same way every time, as I said, unless the defense demands otherwise.
Yeah, and Bo's whole point with that was we know he can do the sidearm stuff. We're trying to make sure that he can do all the rest of it at this point in time and get him ramped up in that spot.
You know what? Because when they call a play, they don't say, hey, run around and throw it sidearm. That's not how it works. Obviously, we know the game has changed to the point where quarterbacks that can make plays outside of structure, that's become increasingly important in the league. And we know that Cam Ward can do that. In fact, I was watching a defense against Miami, and I remembered some of the throws because obviously I'm seeing Cam Ward, and that were really, really impressive. And he can do that, and that's become increasingly important. But that's not the foundation of how you teach a quarterback to play.
Right. And that's what this process is about and will continue to be about through training camp and mandatory minicamp and everything else that we have on
And
the
I'm sure he's receptive. He strikes me as a kid who'll be receptive.
he's busting his ass right now. He's really working hard at it, and he seems to the thing that I appreciate about him, Greg, and it's not necessarily a high level football thing, but it helps in that direction is that he's just about the work. Like it's no frills, it's no
Right.
no ancillary stuff, very matter of fact, and all the things that he's asked and answers in kind. It's just very direct, very about his business, and I think that obviously will take him as far as anything else that he's got
Well,
at
that's
his
the key.
disposal. Yeah,
That's what it should be. I mean, that's what he's here for.
yeah,
So, again, um, all you can do is, each step in the process. I mean, and that's the way coaches look at it. You're just trying to stack. You hear this term a lot, I joke about it when I go to the gym with the old guys that are now my buddies at the gym. You're just trying to stack the days, and you hear coaches talk like that every day. You're just trying to stack the days. That's all you're trying to do. Stack the good days, one after another.
Absolutely. So what we have been doing, obviously, for the audience that has been following along each week, is we've been taking a look at other divisions around the NFL and just kind of catching up on things that have happened since the draft and the offseason. I know we're still technically in the offseason program, but we are getting ready. Training camp will be upon us in the not too distant future. Do you want to
No.
start with the weird one first, or you want to talk about the other three in the AFC North? Do you want to rip
You mean the
the
weirder one? Would that be the Cleveland Browns you're talking
they're
about?
like a they're it's bizarro world in Cleveland at
Well,
this point in time.
it's going to be interesting, because um, obviously it's the quarterback situation that everybody's focused on. And, we have no idea how that's going to play out. I mean, what we do know based on what they did in the draft, drafting Quinshon Judkins with the second pick and Dylan Sampson with the fourth pick, is that they want to run the football. That's the Kevin Stefanski staple. He wants to put the quarterback under center. He wants to have a run game as the starting point, and then the pass game is a play action pass game that works off the run game. That's what he wants to do. So, that's the bottom line. But, and I know that the Titans play the Browns. They're the only AFC North team they play. And as you would mention, they play them later in the season. So who knows who the quarterback will be at that point. But this is a team with a really good offensive line. And, they drafted these backs for the sole purpose of having a run game. So that's kind of where it's going to start for them.
Yeah, and that's what this, outside of the quarterback weirdness is how I'll call it. It is, as you mentioned, Kevin Stefanski just trying to get back to base identity, right? Getting back to
Yeah.
the rules of his offense and what he has found the most amount of success with. And from a personnel standpoint, Greg, I mean, they have an interesting cast of characters here with Cedric Tillman, the former Tennessee wideout, Jerry Jeudy, who's obviously the number one there. And the tight end situation, drafting Harold Fannin Jr. and
Yeah.
having David Njoku under contract with the running backs that they added, it is you can see what they're trying to accomplish. The thing that, as you mentioned, people are having a hard time getting past is who the hell is going to be playing quarterback for this football team.
Yeah. And look, the bottom line is, and this is true, all quarterbacks at some point. I mean, we think of the real. Well, let's put Joe Burrow aside. We'll get to him in a moment. But you think of the Josh Allens, the Mahomes, and the Lamars, who we'll get to as well. And what we do is we think about what they can do outside of structure. But what quarterbacks still have to be as their foundation is ball distributors and executors of an offense. And that's what Stefanski is hoping, that whoever is the guy, Flacco, Pickett, Gabriel, Sanders, we don't know any of this, but whoever it is, he's expecting his quarterback to be an executor of the offense and a ball distributor. And as I said, all quarterbacks have to be that at some point.
Yeah, and we did not spend much time on Dylan Gabriel in the pre-draft conversations. You and I, what his physical his lack of prototypical size is something that gets highlighted very often, but it's a player that has a tremendous amount of collegiate experience. I
Yeah.
believe 6 years in the college game, or pretty close
Yeah.
at
He's
that
played a
point in
lot of
time.
football.
A lot of football and finishing his career at Oregon. Was there anything about him that, when he was drafted in the third round, did you feel that that was an appropriate place for him to go, given what you saw from him on tape, or is there
Well,
something else there that you might have had questions about?
obviously when you're 5'11", although he did weigh 205 at the combine, so I don't know what he played at. Sometimes guys do that because they don't want to come in small. So I don't know what he played at. But he's a certain kind of quarterback, Buck. I mean, he's got a better arm than people think. He definitely is small and he looks small on tape, but he's a rhythm player. I mean, in some ways, he's similar to Tua in the way you'd have to deploy him in the context of an offense. If he's your guy, he's more athletic than Tua. He actually can make plays with his legs. So he does have traits. He does look small.
Yeah.
But if you, again, let's say he's phenomenal through training camp and they decide, you know what, he's going to be our guy. I mean, ultimately, the way Kevin Stefanski wants to run his offense, he theoretically based on his traits, could do that. Now, are there going to be plays? There's always plays for shorter quarterbacks where the size comes into play and, as a negative. But ideally, you're trying to minimize those by how you call the game. But obviously, you can't minimize those when it's 3rd and 9 or certain situations. But he's the main thing that really stood out to me. I watched him last summer too, when he was at Oklahoma. I thought he was actually better at Oklahoma than he was at Oregon, putting aside the numbers. And he was good at Oregon, obviously. Is he does throw the ball better than people probably think because they see small and they probably think doesn't have a good arm, but he actually has a pretty good arm.
Not a lot of changes on the defensive side of the ball with Jim Schwartz continuing to run that unit, but they did add Mason Graham with their first round
Yeah.
pick after the Travis Hunter Jacksonville trade, which will be an interesting pairing with him and Myles Garrett and the rest of that crew on the defensive line. It's a division that is chock full of quarterback talent with Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. I know Pittsburgh's still trying to figure their situation out at this time. And honestly, Greg, I called Cleveland the weird ones, but I don't know what to make of the Steelers
Yeah.
right now either.
Yeah.
Mason Rudolph right now in the driver's seat for that job, and the Aaron Rodgers conundrum still lingering over everything. So maybe we put Pittsburgh to the side for the moment. But I want to talk about Todd Monken and Lamar Jackson and everything that they were able to do there. It's the best version of again, untrained eye, Greg, but it's the best version of Lamar I've ever seen. And this is a player who's an MVP candidate multiple times over.
Yeah, and don't forget, because of the run game element, and I'm talking not just about the scrambling, which is obviously a factor, but I'm also talking about the designed run game, which is a big factor that defenses have to prepare for. And then you have Derrick Henry, who, I mean, it seems like he's not aging at all. I mean, once you read about his, and you know about this from his years in Tennessee, the offseason program, oh my God. I mean, it feels like the guy's going to play till he's 50. But I mean, it's just their run game element to their offense, which obviously features Lamar, is just really, really difficult. Um, Defenses have to play a certain way. They become more predictable. You know what you're going to get. And I think that's not talked about enough, Buck, is that the way defenses have to become more predictable because it impacts the second level of defenses and it impacts the third level of defenses when Lamar's in the gun and there's a run game element on every single play, pretty much, unless it's 3rd and long. Um, uh, so it's really hard. They're really hard to defend. And it gives Lamar pretty clean, defined reads and throws. And he was very, very good last year.
Oh, he was excellent. So much fun to watch, and obviously what notable additions, more on the defensive side of the ball, I might argue, in the draft than on the offensive side of the ball. But DeAndre Hopkins is going to be in
Yeah.
Baltimore this year. They just gave Rashad Bateman a new contract this morning, as a matter of fact, and we know Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews will round out that skill group outside of Derrick Henry and what he brings in the rushing attack. And I really like the division of labor between him and Justice Hill, Greg. That felt like the
Yeah.
best version of what Derek's been, what can supplement Derek's talent the best that I've seen in quite some time. And again, when you have a quarterback like Lamar that makes things almost impossible to defend, it makes everything else in your offense look significantly easier. Not to take anything away from those guys, but I just really liked the way that they split that up. They did add Malachi Starks on defense in the first round. Him and Kyle Hamilton as a safety pairing. I wonder what you make of that in the Ravens
Yeah.
defense under
I
Zach
thought
Orr.
Yeah, I thought that was a really good pick for them. I mean, Starks was not my number one safety, but you have to think about your team. Nick Emanwari was my number one safety, but he's probably too similar stylistically to Kyle Hamilton, and they were looking for a post safety. And I thought watching Starks, to me, he was at his best as a back end player. In fact, when I watched him, I often got thoughts of Jesse Bates. So I think that was a really good pick for them and what they need for their defense. And that's so much of what the draft is. We can sit and evaluate players all day, but teams are thinking about, hey, what impacts our team the best? And so I thought Starks was a really good pick for them. They've got a really good defense. They've got, players that maybe a lot of people aren't aware of, like Matabuke, who's really, really good. Kyle Van Noy is just another ageless guy like Derrick Henry. I mean, it seems like as a pass rusher, he's just getting better and better and better. Um, I guess what's going to be interesting is Trenton Simpson, who sort of got benched last year. Can he come back now and be the starter? Because he was a third round pick. They'd really like him to be that guy next to Roquan Smith.
Yeah, and they did draft. I think is it Teddy Buchanan in the
Freddie
fourth round.
Buchanan, I did him in the fourth round. Yeah. Um, I didn't view him as a starter right off the bat when I watched him, but again, it'll be competition. Obviously Simpson has a ways to go in the minds of the coaching staff, so there'll be competition there.
Yeah, certainly that's the case. And the other notable draft pick, Mike Green out of Marshall, the pass rusher
Yeah,
in the second round, whose stock fell in the draft order for a variety of different reasons, but Baltimore at least keeps him close to home for him. And if you had to pick one team where a guy like that might flourish, it would probably be the Ravens
yeah,
in their defensive situation. So now to Cincinnati, where their OTAs have been interesting to follow along from a contract standpoint and everything going on with Shamar Stewart, their first round pick. But they do the thing that everybody expected them to do, which is they finally give Jamar Chase that contract. They do give T. Higgins a contract as well, though it's a little bit more monopoly money than anything else. And they draft Dylan Fairchild in the third round to play left guard at this point to kind of fortify things in front of Joe Burrow. We know that the offense wasn't an issue last year in Cincinnati. The defense was the thing that damned them in so many of these games.
yeah.
Greg, and I just, from my standpoint, understanding that Lou Anarumo is now out, Al Golden comes in as a defensive coordinator, and their personnel on defense largely stays the same as far as projected starters. I wonder when you watch the Bengals on defense and kind of what you were seeing from from them last year as far as why it was so difficult for them to get off the field.
Yeah, well, their secondary is really young and really, and I hate to use this word, but really inconsistent in the way they played, literally snap after snap. I mean, Cam Taylor-Britt was benched twice, and he's pretty talented. So if you look at their secondary right now, okay, think about how young it is. They've got, well, they hope to get Dax Hill back, and he was their best corner. They had moved him to corner last year, and then he tore his ACL. But he's only a third year player. So, and he's coming off a tough injury. But then they have DJ Turner, who's a second year player. Well, I guess Hill's a fourth year and Turner's a third year. They have Jordan Battle. He's a second year. I mean, a lot of these guys, I forget the years, but even Cam Taylor-Britt, all these guys are young. So what they're doing is what a lot of teams don't necessarily do as much as other teams is they're giving their young players that they drafted, that they obviously had good draft grades on and felt could be good pros. Because when you draft guys in the second and third round, you're anticipating that they can become starting players and contributing quality starters. That's what they're counting on. They're counting on that these guys can develop into good football players instead of just going out and getting veterans who are 30 years old. They're going to stick with their young guys. They're going to change the scheme, hope that helps, and go from there.
A lot of times, and coaches will talk about this. I'm sure you've had many, many more conversations to that effect than I have, but how much more right players, particularly talented players, will make a coach look within the concept or within
Yeah.
the construct of their scheme. And I'm not as educated as you, obviously, in the schematics and the analysis of what the Bengals do on offense, even though I understand conceptually what they're trying to accomplish, and I understand that they have a couple of fire-breathing dragons on that side of the ball. But with Joe Burrow and the progress or the progression that you are seeing from him in his career, I don't know that he's ever played the quarterback at a higher position or at a higher level than he did last year. And I wonder what you're seeing from Joe right now or what you saw from him last year that is allowing him to continue to elevate, even though we already know him to be a very high level player.
Well, and talking to people, the thing about Burrow, and you can see it on film, but then you get it validated when you talk to people, is he's almost like a computer chip. The way he sees the game is you can't really coach that. I mean, obviously you coach scheme, you can coach a lot of things, but you can't coach the way a guy sees it. You can go over that. You can talk about, hey, we're running this concept against this defense. Here's where the ball is probably going to go. That's what coaches do. They go through all their concepts in the pass game. I had this conversation the night of the install when I asked Coach Callahan, how do you start? And he said, you start with the concepts. That's pretty universal. You start with the concepts, so whatever the number of concepts you want to teach the quarterback or give the quarterback, because there's always more, but you start there. And then you say, okay, this particular concept against cover 3, this is the guy that's going to be the primary. Against cover 2, it might be this guy who's, but that's the way it's taught. Burrow just is one of those guys that he sees it. It's hard to explain, Buck. I mean, I always relate it to like a point guard in basketball. You're a basketball guy, you watch the NCAA tournament, this is an older player, but people are aware of him. You can't teach someone to see the court like Jason Kidd.
Yeah.
You either see it like that or you don't. I mean, you can talk about it. You can talk about floor balance. You can say, hey, we're going to set this screen. We're going to do, that's all great. But you can't teach the way people just happen to see it.
Yeah.
And Joe Burrow, like I said, I've talked to people about this, but I can see it on film too. I saw this when he came out. He's just like a computer chip. He just sees it.
It's innate, I think, is the way that you would describe it more often than not. And to your point, it's so fun to watch. By the way, big night for Indiana basketball. Pacers in the first game of the finals against
I know.
Oklahoma City. I'm fired up
I'll
about
probably
that,
watch it
baby.
tonight. Yeah.
At least one of my basketball teams can be good, Greg. Thank God. I'm fascinated to see what happens with the Bengals this year, especially given the strength of the AFC. And I understanding that was a good football team last year. And
Right.
talking to coaches, there are certain things that damned them,
Right.
specifically on defense, some self-inflicted wounds that way as well, that just kept a good team out of the playoffs with one of the best offenses that we'd seen in quite some time.
I mean,
Now for Pittsburgh. Go ahead.
Well, just before we did, I forget the number, but I think there were 4 or 5 games last year where they scored more than 30 or 33 points and lost.
Yeah, it's two of them against the Ravens, right?
Yeah, that's right. Right. Yeah.
I mean, you look at the numbers for Burrow and Chase in those games, you're like, how the hell did they lose this football game? But
I mean, Chase is, one final comment about their defense and their secondary room is Rondé Barber has talked a lot about coaching and player mentorship. Now, obviously, the coaches will coach, but you wonder where the player mentorship will come from. That's the tough deal. They've got all young players, and you almost want a veteran who can mentor some of these young guys. That's the one thing that arguably they're missing. Even Josh Newton played a lot last year. He's only going into his second year. I mean, they don't have a veteran in that secondary room.
yeah, no, talk about things that are difficult to quantify, Greg, and it's interesting that you bring that up because Brian Callahan here has instituted an off-season version of the Hunger Games for these guys to try and build team camaraderie, build leadership qualities where they've divvied them up into 8 individual teams that are competing in a point system with each other throughout the course of OTAs and into training camp and trying to generate like leadership skills, grow leadership skills.
Right.
Where they felt they were lacking in that department last year because it felt like they just threw a bunch of guys together, right?
And that's something that you really want. I mean, Logan Wilson, for instance, he's not even I mean, he's a veteran, but he hasn't been in the league for 10 years, but he's a veteran who's been around a little bit. That'll be good for Demetrius Knight. I mean, you and Barrett Carter, you want that. You want players who are veterans who young players can go to because a coach can coach and all that. And you know how it is. It's different when a veteran player talks to you other than a coach. That's just a different deal.
Yeah, I think we should table the Steelers until we know what the hell's going on at quarterback, because honestly, that would change the entire conversation. Greg, I appreciate your sitting down with us as always, and look forward to continuing our divisional previews, and look forward to having you in the house next week. I know we're going to have some fun conversations with some interesting individuals.
Oh, for sure. I'm really looking forward to that, Buck. It's great to always be with you in person. And of course it's always great to be in Nashville. And I guess we're in CMA Music Fest week, so I'm getting there right after.
Yeah, you're gonna miss the tidal wave of drunks that is currently gonna keep my.
No, I was there 3 years in a row back a while, so I kind of remember that.
Yeah.
My younger daughter and I, when we'd go to the stadium, because we went 4 years in a row, she would always say to me, Dad, I think we're the only two people here who aren't drunk.
And you know what? She's probably right.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. I'll look forward to getting you into town next week. Thank you
All
again.
right. Thanks, Buck.